Aha, good evening. It is the 26th of January, 2022. And here we are. As is our brand new custom, I wanted to spend the next 5 minutes or so as we are waiting for people to join our little live stream. To open up this for prayer requests. If anybody has something that they would like prayer for, or they know someone who needs prayer about something, write it in the comments, or I don't know how else you would let me know about that, so that we can pray for that as we are, or when we begin. So I've got one. I was talking with an old friend, a young man who is grown up, an adult now, not from around here, and recently graduated dental school and got a job as a dental assistant, I believe. Well, he was hired on as a dental assistant, but the company or the clinic that hired him ended up being somewhat deceptive about what they were hiring him to do, and gave somebody else the job that they had promised him and stuck him answering phones at the front desk. So he left that job, which I can't imagine he wouldn't, and he's looking for another one. So he asked me to be praying that he gets a job doing what he actually learned how to do rather than answering phones. So, not that there's anything wrong with answering phones, but if I went to dental school and learned all of that stuff, I would not be content with calendar stuff. I don't think I'd be content with calendar stuff no matter what I went to school for. Anyway, his name's Alex. I used to tease him that I named my son after him, and that seemed to embarrass him, so I stopped doing that. Got a couple minutes left, so if anybody else has anything that they would like prayer for, we will lift that up. I know we still have folks in Simple Truth who are recovering from COVID. Probably there's new people that I'm unaware of who have gotten COVID. In fact, the one person that I had talked to, Steve Sagan, I didn't realize that they had COVID. I didn't know that, but he said that they are. Well, his words were he just got off the COVID train, him and Susie. So praise God that they are well. But I'm sure that there's other folks that I'm unaware of who are still sick, or just got sick. I don't know. It's going pretty crazy out there right now with the Omicron. People are getting sick left and right. Thankfully, it seems to be much more mild than some different previous versions. So, looks like it's 6 o'clock. So with that, I guess I'm just praying for Alex and the Sagans and our Bible study. So here we go. Lord, I want to thank you for this time that we could gather and read your word, study what you have to say to us. Lord, I ask that you would give us wisdom and grace. Help us to approach your word with open hearts, and ask that you would help us to understand what you have to say to us. Help us to apply it to our lives. And Lord, we want to lift up Alex. Pray that you would help him to find another new job. I know that he is a hard worker, and he's dedicated a lot of his time and effort into learning how to do what he wants to do. So Lord, I pray that you'd open a door for him. And I also want to lift up all the folks, not just in Simple Truth, not just in our county, but all over the place. Ask that you would help them to be well. Lord, I pray that people would recover from COVID and anything else that's going on with them rapidly, and that they would turn and praise you. And Lord, I pray that you would just continue to bless us as a church. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, so we're going to be in Daniel chapter 11 tonight. And last week we began the final prophecy of the book of Daniel. The whole episode of this last prophecy actually takes 3 whole chapters, and it's kind of got a interesting format of introduction, which we looked at last week, and then the content of the prophecy, and then a conclusion that'll be in chapter 12. And that's the last chapter of Daniel, chapter 12. So the introduction, in large part, was kind of a story of God preparing Daniel's heart and mind to receive the content of his word, the message that he sent by an angel to Daniel. And so Daniel got a glimpse of the spiritual realm. He saw the work and the warfare of angels, and he had a vision of what I believe was Jesus over the river, Tigris River, and all of that basically just wrecked him. He was passed out on the ground, and it took several angels to come along and comfort him, pick him up, put him on his feet, say nice, friendly things to him for a little while until he was ready. And it's kind of funny, I was thinking about this in terms of life experiences that Daniel's had, and he had a lot of them. Remember, this is the guy that got thrown into a lion's den. In terms of life experiences, this is probably the strangest one that Daniel ever went through. And yet, the prophecy that comes after this is the least strange of the prophecies that he has, the visions that he has seen. Remember, he had the one that was basically just monsters climbing out of the sea and battling. This prophecy is very much just an angel giving him a pretty plain account of people going and doing things in different places that are going to happen in the future. You'll see, I hope. So Daniel chapter 10 ends with Daniel basically saying, hey, I'm ready to hear this message. And the angel responds with kind of a disclaimer of, hey, I have to get back to the fighting really quick here, so this is going to have to be quick. So the first verse of Daniel chapter 11 actually kind of goes along with the last few verses of chapter 10. So back up with me just a minute. Daniel chapter 10, verse 20. The angel says, then he said, do you know why I have come to you? But now I will return to the fight against the prince of Persia. And when I go out, behold, the prince of Greece will come. But I will tell you what is inscribed in the book of truth. There was none who contends by my side against these except Michael, your prince. And as for me, in the first year of Darius the Mede, I stood up to confirm and strengthen him. So that's the first verse of Daniel chapter 11. And we touched on the idea last week that throughout this whole 3-chapter prophecy, we are seeing kind of 3 different tiers of conflict, of the warfare that is going on in the world all the time. And we're going to talk about it again when we get to Daniel chapter 12. But that's the angelic conflict. In addition to everything else in chapter 10, that little blurb right there that we just finished off, that's angelic conflict. And now, as we begin in earnest chapter 11, we are getting to see sort of the human side of events. So, Daniel chapter 11, starting in verse 2. And now I will show you the truth. Behold, 3 more kings shall arise in Persia, and a fourth shall be far richer than all of them. And when he has become strong through his riches, he shall stir up all against the kingdom of Greece. Then a mighty king shall arise who will rule with great dominion and do as he wills. And as soon as he has arisen, his kingdom shall be broken and divided toward the 4 winds of heaven, but not to his posterity, nor according to the authority with which he ruled, for his kingdom shall be plucked up and go to others besides these. So this should be a somewhat familiar thing to us by now. at least twice now we've talked about the transition of power between Persia and Greece and the sort of sudden rise of Alexander the Great, coupled by his very sudden downfall. And then, of course, after his death, his kingdom was divided into 4 different territories that went to 4 of his greatest generals. Alexander the Great actually had 2 sons of his own who were very small boys when he died, and they were subsequently murdered before they could inherit anything. So that's why it says it doesn't go to his posterity, and not according to his power, because none of these 4 generals ruled with any of the authority that Alexander the Great had. So the focus of the rest of this prophecy that we're about to read is a conflict between 2 of these territories that were divided. The northern territory was the Seleucid. I'm probably not saying that right, but it doesn't matter. Seleucid territory, that's the northern territory, which is, or was, located in Syria, and its capital was Damascus. And the southern territory is known as the Ptolemaic kingdom, which was in Egypt, and its capital was Alexandria. Now those territories, Ptolemaic, whatever, they're named after the generals who basically began as the rulers of those kingdoms. And it just so happens that Israel is right in the middle between the northern and the southern kingdom. And so the wars between the northern and the southern kingdom affected Daniel's people, and that's why the angel is bringing him the message about all of this that's going to happen. So we're going to read a huge chunk of Daniel chapter 11 right now, and it's almost confusing in the detail, the amount of detail that we get. So try to follow along, but it's basically just the story of battles between the northern kingdom and the southern kingdom, and here we go. So, verse 5. Then the king of the south shall be strong, but one of his princes shall be stronger than he, and shall rule, and his authority shall be a great authority. After some years they shall make an alliance, and the daughter of the king of the south shall come to the king of the north to make an agreement. But she shall not retain the strength of her arm, and he and his arm shall not endure, but she shall be given up, and her attendants who fathered her, he who fathered her, and he who supported her in those times. And from a branch, from her roots, one shall arise in his place. He shall come against the army and enter the fortress of the king of the north, and he shall deal with them and shall prevail. He shall also carry off to Egypt their gods with their metal images and their precious vessels of silver and gold. And for some years he shall refrain from attacking the king of the north. Then the latter shall come into the realm of the king of the south, but shall return to his own land. His sons shall wage war and assemble a great multitude of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through, and again shall carry the war as far as his fortress. Then the king of the south, moved with rage, shall come out and fight against the king of the north, and he shall raise a great multitude, but it shall be given into his hand. And when a multitude is taken away, his heart shall be exalted, but he shall cast down tens of thousands, but he shall not prevail. For the king of the north shall again raise a multitude greater than the first, and after some years he shall come on with a great army and abundant supplies. In those times many shall rise against the king of the south, and the violent among your own people shall lift themselves up in order to fulfill the vision, but they shall fail. Then the king of the north shall come and throw up siege works and take a well-fortified city. And the forces of the south shall not stand, nor even his best troops, for there shall be no strength to stand. But he who comes against him shall do as he wills, and none shall stand before him. And he shall stand in the glorious land with destruction in his hand, and he shall set his face to come with the strength of his whole kingdom, and shall bring terms of an agreement and perform them. And he shall give the daughter of women to destroy the kingdom, but it shall not stand or be to his advantage. Afterward he shall turn his face to the coastlands, and shall capture many of them. But a commander shall put an end to his insolence. Indeed, he shall turn back his insolence back upon him. Then he shall turn his face back toward the fortress of his own land, but he shall stumble and fall, and shall not be found. Then shall arise in his place one who shall send an exactor of tribute for the glory of the kingdom, but within a few days he shall be broken, neither in anger nor in battle. So, like I said, big chunk of detailed information in there. And the time period that is described in those verses that we just read is from 323 BC to 187 BC. So where it says that there was a king of the north and a king in the south, there was actually a lot of men who served in both of those positions, as king of the north and as king of the south. And you may have noticed just the sheer amount, I mean, how could you not notice the sheer amount of detail of the movements, of the battles that went in, this conflict between them, back and forth, back and forth. And as I was studying and reading, the details of this are very fascinating, especially when you match the history that we have recorded, not in the Bible necessarily, but outside historical records of this time period and these kings and the areas that they conquered and how the battles went and all of that stuff matches up perfectly with the prophecy that we just read. However, if we were to go through all of that and I pointed out every single one of those details and how it matched up with an event in history, we would be here not just all night, but probably the next 3 weeks we would just be talking about all of those details. We will get into some of the details of events that are still coming later on in the book of Daniel. So here's the options. First option is you can just take my word for it, that the history of this conflict that Daniel recorded lined up perfectly with the prophecies about it. Take my word for it. I tell you that. Or you can send me a message either on the screen or behind the scenes, or send me a text message, whatever, and I can send you some of the material that I read while I was studying, and you can read it all for yourself. It really is fascinating, especially if you are at all interested in history and just the sort of back and forth court intrigue and drama, and so-and-so's daughter was married to one of the other kings, and it's interesting. But a quick summary of at least the overview of the events is that in the beginning, Israel began as territory of the southern kingdom down in Egypt, right? But eventually, by the end of that big chunk, it was taken by the king of the north. Now, the king of the north was encouraged by his victory over the king of the south, and he decided that he was going to begin expanding his territory along the Mediterranean coast. So he launched a campaign, and he was turned back by forces actually of a sort of new Roman coalition. So we're starting to see the next empire beginning to grow. So the Romans turned back the king of the north. They forced him to sign a treaty and basically charged him a fine for, hey, you invaded us, we defeated you, you owe us a whole bunch of money. So the king of the north went back home, and he ended up being killed by a mob of his own people when he tried to loot the temple of Zeus for funds to give to the Romans. They didn't like that, so the mob killed him. So his son became king, and he sent a sort of tax collector, it says an exactor of taxes, or a tribute, or whatever it said here. He sent this tax collector guy to Israel to raise money for the Romans. Court intrigue, back and forth. The tax collector ended up poisoning the new king of the north, and that was the end of their short reign. So all of that stuff is sort of the backstory for the man who is about to take center stage now, named Antiochus Epiphanes. I really am sorry that I have to sort of gloss over the rich detail of all of this, but that's kind of just the constraint that we have here. And like I said, if you are at all interested in learning more about that, I can send you a document that you can read that I read about all of that stuff, and it is fascinating. Verse 21. In his place shall arise a contemptible person to whom royal majesty has not been given. He shall come in without warning and obtain the kingdom by flatteries. Armies shall be utterly swept away before him and broken, even the prince of the covenant. And from the time that an alliance is made with him, he shall act deceitfully, and he shall become strong with a small people. Without warning, he shall come into the richest parts of the province, and he shall do what neither his fathers nor his fathers' fathers have done, scattering amongst them plunder, spoil, and goods. He shall devise plans against strongholds, but only for a time. And he shall stir up his power and his heart against the king of the south with a great army. And the king of the south shall wage war with an exceedingly great and mighty army, but he shall not stand, for plots shall be devised against him. Even those who eat his food shall break him. His army shall be swept away, and many shall fall down slain. As for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail. For the end is yet to be at the time appointed. And he shall return to his land with great wealth, but his heart shall be set against the holy covenant. And he shall work his will and return to his own land. So, this contemptible person that we see introduced here is Antiochus Epiphanes. He was the brother of the king of the north who was poisoned by the tax collector, and it's sort of speculated by historians that he had a part, he helped this tax collector guy kill his brother so that he could take power in the north. Now he was Antiochus the Fourth, and he gave himself the sort of title or last name Epiphanes, which means illustrious one, it's kind of a boast about sort of being divinely inspired, I guess, is that Epiphanes. That's what that means. And it's almost alluding towards the possibility that this man might be himself divine. So once again, there's a lot of detail that we just read of things that Antiochus did. His battles with the king of the south. There was actually the king of the south came in to attack Antiochus in the north, and Antiochus defeated him, took him captive. That captive king's brother became the king in the south, and then Antiochus and his captured king contrived together to then go and invade the south together. That's where it talks about how, as for the two kings, their hearts shall be bent on doing evil. They shall speak lies at the same table, but to no avail. For the end is yet to be at the same time. Antiochus and this captured king, they both betrayed each other. It got messy. And it's crazy how perfectly, this is just like a drop in the bucket of the details that are supplied here. It's crazy how perfectly it matches up, this prophecy of stuff that's happening hundreds of the years in the future for Daniel. It lines up perfectly with what ended up happening in history. But we're going to kind of focus mostly on the part of the story that concerns Israel. So these, lying guys made an alliance. They went down into the south to attack. Antiochus, despite the betrayal of his so-called ally, he ended up reconquering Israel and a portion of Egypt. And so he went home with his plunder that he won in this campaign. But as he passed back through Israel on his way home, he found that the Jews were in full rebellion against his rule. So at that time, he viciously put down this insurrection against him. It's estimated that he killed 80,000 men, women, and children to put down this rebellion. It says his heart was set against the Holy Covenant. So at that point, he also killed the high priest. He installed his own high priest who was aligned with him, looted the temple, and eventually went back home. So this is just the beginning of his persecution of the Jews and the cruelty that he's going to have towards them. As it progresses, as we're about to read, it's almost as if he is completely immune. He can do whatever he wants, and there's not going to have consequences. But twice, just in that passage that we read, it says that Antiochus Epiphanes, his time is limited. He only has up until the appointed time, and then his time is going to be up. So, verse 29. At the time appointed he shall return and come into the south, but it shall not be this time as it was before. For ships of Kittim shall come against him, and he shall be afraid and withdraw, and shall turn back and be enraged, and take action against the holy covenant. He shall turn back and pay attention to those who forsake the holy covenant. So after a while, Antiochus decided he was going to re-invade the south, go on another campaign against the southern kingdom. Only this time it didn't go very well for him. The two brothers who were now jointly ruling the southern kingdom in Egypt, they asked Rome for help. And so where it says the ships of Kittim came and turned them back, that's a reference to Romans arriving on the Mediterranean Sea. And it's said that a Roman commander met Antiochus Epiphanes outside the capital of Egypt, Alexandria, and he gave him a letter from the Roman Senate. And the Roman Senate demanded that he leave Egypt, or he's going to have the consequence of a war with Rome. And the commander drew a circle around Antiochus Epiphanes in the sand and told him that he was not allowed to leave that circle before he answered the letter. So Antiochus had no choice but to agree with their demands. He left Egypt in humiliation. He was enraged, and he turned this rage against the Jews. Verse 31. Forces from him shall appear and profane the temple and the fortress, and shall take away the regular burnt offering, and they shall set up the abomination that makes desolate. He shall seduce with flattery those who violate the covenant, but the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. And the wise among the people shall make many understand, though for some days they shall stumble by sword and flame, by captivity and plunder. When they stumble, they shall receive a little help, and many shall join themselves to them in flattery, and some of the wise shall stumble, so that they may be refined, purified, and made white until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. So it talks about Antiochus kind of turning his attention towards Israel again, and the best way to describe this renewed persecution of the Jews is just to read the historical record of the book of Maccabees. So here is a portion of the book of Maccabees. This comes from what we call the Apocrypha books that I think some of the Jews accept these books as scripture. The Catholics accept the Apocrypha as scripture. We don't, but this is still just a historical record of what it was like when Antiochus returned his attention to Israel. It says, 2 years later, the king sent to the cities of Judah a chief collector of tribute, and he came to Jerusalem with a large force. Deceitfully, he spoke peaceable words to them, and they believed him. But he suddenly fell upon the city, dealt it a severe blow, and destroyed many people of Israel. He plundered the city, burned it with fire, and tore down its houses and its surrounding walls. They took captive the women and children, and seized the livestock. Then they fortified the city of David with a great strong wall and strong towers, and it became their citadel. They stationed there a sinful people, men who were renegades. These strengthened their position. They stored up arms and food, and collecting the spoils of Jerusalem, they stored from there, then became a great menace. That is from the book of 1 Maccabees, chapter 1. So it talks there about sinful men, renegades. Daniel talks about how Antiochus flattered people with words and gave them gifts or briberies. So some Jews actually supported and joined with their attackers, and these guys were known as Hellenists. And at that point especially, Hellenists were synonymous. The word Hellenist was synonymous with traitor. And this kind of sheds some light on some of the conflict that you see, even as far as when Jesus was here on earth. There's tension between the group known as the Pharisees and the groups of the Hellenists. But there was others who rebelled against this occupation and this new persecution of the Jews. Among them were a set of brothers who became known as the Maccabees. That's not their actual name, but that's kind of the nickname that people gave them, which means the hammers. So they were stirred up to fight against their oppressors. And Antiochus responded to this rebellion with just ever-increasing, harsher persecution of the Jews. And I read some portions of 1st and 2nd Maccabees while I was studying, and it's pretty horrific, actually, the things that is described, tortures and things like that were inflicted upon the Jews during this time. It was also during this time that Antiochus stopped the regular worship of God in the temple. They took over God's temple and made it a temple to Zeus, and Antiochus sacrificed a pig to Zeus on the altar, which is known as the abomination of desolation. We've talked about that in other portions of Daniel. And as I said before, it seems as if he was immune. He was just successful in everything he did, including and especially the persecution of God's people. But it was only for a time. His time was limited. And we read in other places about the downfall of Antiochus Epiphanes. This is from Daniel chapter 8, starting in verse 23. It says, and at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limit, a king with a bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper, and under his hand and in his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many, and he shall even rise up against the Prince of Princes, and he shall be broken, but by no hand. Which is interesting, just to see how you see the sort of progress of him rising and rising and rising, even up on, it says, against the Prince of Princes, and then just within a few verses or a few words, he is broken without human hand. He just dies. Antiochus's reign was eventually thrown off by the Maccabees, and then he fell sick and died pretty much without warning. Very rapidly he died. So Daniel 11 actually kind of skips over Antiochus's death. It just talks about him sort of succeeding in all that he did. But then we get one of those sort of time gaps or skips that we have seen several times in the book of Daniel, where the angelic messenger begins suddenly to speak of the time of the end. And in verse 35, he says, until the time of the end, for it still awaits the appointed time. And then suddenly he's talking about end times after this. So Antiochus just completely fades from view after this point. He had this sort of attempt to take the place of God. He named himself Epiphanes. He stood in the temple and tried to corrupt God's people through flattery and deceit, drawing them away from worshiping God. But he failed. He died. Just suddenly his reign was thrown off and he died. But there was another Antichrist coming, and Antiochus Epiphanes, as bad as his persecution was, is just kind of a foreshadowing for this Antichrist who's coming. So, verse 36, and from here on out we're talking about things that are still future even for us, the end times. And the king shall do as he wills. He shall exalt himself and magnify himself above every god, and shall speak astonishing things against the God of gods. He shall prosper until the indignation is accomplished, For what is decreed shall be done. He shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers, or to the one beloved by women. He shall not pay attention to any other god, for he shall magnify himself above all. He shall honor the God of fortresses instead of these, a God whom his fathers did not know. He shall honor with gold and silver, with precious stones and costly gifts. He shall deal with the strongest fortresses with the help of a foreign god. Those who acknowledge him he shall hold with honor. He shall make them rulers over many, and shall divide the land for a price. So, as I said, this portion deals with end times, which are still in the future. And this description, although it can sound familiar to Antiochus Epiphanes, is actually of the Antichrist, whose identity we don't yet know. There are, without going into too much detail, because I know we're already at 6:30, there are some similarities there, but there's things that are in there that show us that this is definitely not the description of Antiochus Epiphanes. For example, it says that he shall pay no attention to the gods of his fathers or to the one beloved by women. And that's definitely not Antiochus Epiphanes, because he was worshiping Zeus in God's temple, the god of his fathers. So, much like Antiochus, the Antichrist is going to exalt himself against God. He's going to deceive many, lead many of people away, even God's people, and he's going to have great success in persecuting God's people. Much of these details are sort of vague and unclear to us now, because it's something that is still in our future. But it sounds as though he is going to sort of make a religion of warfare, make a religion of might, and kind of put himself as the center of this religion, as the conqueror of the world. Revelation chapter 13 talks about this. And there's, of course, a lot of cross references in Revelation that are going to shed more light onto the Antichrist. But Revelation chapter 13, verse 4 says, and they worshipped the dragon, that's the Antichrist, for he had given his authority to the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, who is like the beast, and who can fight against him? I had that wrong. The beast there is the Antichrist. So, Daniel 11 goes on more about the Antichrist. It says, at the time of the end, the king of the south shall attack him, but the king of the north shall rush upon him like a whirlwind, with chariots and horsemen, and with many ships. And he shall come into countries, and shall overflow and pass through. He shall come into the glorious land, and tens of thousands shall fall. But these shall be divided out of his hand. These shall be delivered out of his hand. Edom and Moab and the main part of the Ammonites. He shall stretch out his hand against the countries, and the land of Egypt shall not escape. He shall become ruler of the treasuries of gold and of silver, and of the precious things of Egypt, and the Libyans and the Cushites shall follow in his train. But news from the east and the north shall alarm him, and he shall go out with great fury to destroy and devote many to destruction. And he shall pitch his palatial tents between the sea and the glorious holy mountain. Yet he shall come to his end with none to help him. So even more war and more destruction and persecutions are still to come in the end times. And a lot of people like to speculate about what all is going to happen in the time described by these verses, although I would say that there's not a whole lot of agreement in what people say are these different factions. It talks about the king of the south, the king of the north, the Edom and Moab, and the Ammonites. Who even are those people anymore? So I'm not really going to speculate. I'm not going to talk about the details of all of that's going on. Whoever is part of all of these wars, it kind of ends with the Battle of Armageddon. It doesn't give it that title, but that's what it's talking about. And the messenger, the angel, talks about how the Antichrist is going to camp between the sea and Mount Zion in preparation for this battle. And in case you don't know this, that area is known as the Valley of Megiddo, which is why it's called the Battle of Armageddon, because of where it takes place. It's not an event, it's a location. So, again, in the book of Revelation, we get more detail about this event. And I'm going to read kind of a longer portion of Revelation now. This is Revelation chapter 19, starting in verse 11. And this is a description of the Battle of Armageddon. Then I saw heaven opened, and behold, a white horse. The one sitting on it is called Faithful and True, and in righteousness he judges and makes war. His eyes are like a flame of fire, and on his head are many diadems. That's a crown. And he has a name written that no one knows but himself. He is clothed in a robe dipped in blood, and the name by which he is called is the Word of God. And the armies of heaven, arrayed in fine linen, white and pure, were following him on white horses. From his mouth comes a sharp sword with which to strike down the nations, and he shall rule them with a rod of iron. And he will tread the winepress of the fury of the wrath of God, the Almighty. And on his robe and on his thigh he has a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. Then I saw an angel standing in the sun, and with a loud voice he called to all the birds that fly directly overhead, Come, gather for the great supper of God, to eat the flesh of kings, the flesh of captains, the flesh of mighty men, the flesh of horses and their riders, and the flesh of all men, both free and slave, both small and great. And I saw the beast, that's the Antichrist, and the kings of the earth, while their armies gathered to make war against him who was sitting on the horse and against his army. And the beast was captured, and with it the false prophet who in his presence had done the signs by which he deceived those who had received the marks of the beast and those who worshipped its image. And these two were thrown alive into the lake of fire that burns with sulfur, and the rest were slain by the sword that came from the mouth of him who was sitting on the horse, and all the birds were gorged with their flesh. So that's the end of the Antichrist. It says that he fell suddenly without warning in Daniel chapter 11, and we see how that took place in Revelation chapter 19. Jesus showed up. Boom, dead, gone, alive into the lake of fire. So all of that, all of Daniel chapter 11 is kind of a lot of information. And believe me when I say, again, the details that we kind of glossed over are thick. There's a lot of information there. And some of you might be wondering, like I was wondering, what do I do with this information? Why do I want to know any of this? You know, some of it is ancient history, you know, the Greeks before even the real rise of the Roman Empire. How does that matter to me now? Some of it is distant future, perhaps. So what do we do with this information? Why did God give us this? What does he want us to do with what he just told us? So the main takeaway for me is that we can know that God is reliable. You know, according to the source that I read about the history and how all of these things line up, there are 135 prophecies that are made about the movements and the battles and the alliances and the betrayals that take place between the kings of the north and the king of the south, and stuff that goes on with Antiochus Epiphanes, all of that stuff. 135 prophecies packed into the first 35 verses of Daniel chapter 11. And those are just the ones that, like, you can identify and collaborate with history. That, by the way, is why I could walk through all of those details. That would take forever. So because of all that, you know, God told Daniel these things were going to happen hundreds of years before they would. And it's all accurate. It's all reliable. It's all verifiable by history. So we know that when God talks about things that are still to come, he is just as reliable. He is a reliable source for what's going to happen. So we know that there are going to come days when the enemies of God and God's people are going to have success over us, that they're going to have power over us. Persecutions are predicted for God's people. But the ultimate victory of God is assured to us. You know, there's going to come times where, you know, we lose. when God's enemies win. But we know that that's not the real end, because God is going to have the ultimate victory, and we are going to have victory with him. I've got the verse from 2 Timothy chapter 2. When I get there. Almost had it. 2 Timothy 2, verse 11 says, "The saying is trustworthy, for if we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he will also deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself." You know, like I said, we have persecutions coming for us. We know that's a thing that God has promised us is happening in the future. But if we suffer with him, we will also reign with him. His victory is assured to us, and we're going to have a part in that victory. And the same God who told Daniel that all of these things were going to happen so far in the future, and one by one they line up, they all happen. He's the same God who has assured us our salvation. He's the same God who promised that he would give us the ultimate triumph. And so, you know, it might be that we live long enough to live through the Great Tribulation, and it's going to be bad, right? There's nothing good about it. But we know that he's going to give us triumph. And if we don't live that long, we still have our own daily small tribulations that we go through. Maybe not the Great Tribulation, but we have our own small things that we just daily go through. And God gives us victory and triumph in all of those things as well. Either it's great or it's small. Our only assurance, our only hope, our trust and our triumph is in our God. So, Daniel chapter 11. Let's pray. Lord God, we thank you that you have given wisdom, you've given knowledge, that you have shown us the things that are going to take place, that you showed Daniel the things that would take place before they did. And we can look back in history and see, wow, those things line up, God, that you actually did know what was happening. And so we know that you know the future as well. Our future is mysterious to us, but it's not to you. And our lives can be unpredictable from our perspective, but you know each and everything that's going to happen to us, and you are holding us up, you're preparing us for the future, and you have promised us that you're going to guide us, you're going to hold us up even when we feel like we're falling down, that we know that you aren't going to lose any of your children from your hand. So, Lord, we put our trust in you. As the world seems to get crazier and crazier, we know that we find our foundation is in you, and we won't be disappointed in you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. All right, everybody. So one more chapter of Daniel next week, and then I'll tell you what we're going to do after that probably next week. So everybody have a great week. Thanks for joining me, and hope to see you soon. God bless.